Yes, welcome to the webinar. I do apologise. Mona Sakr is joining us this morning, and she is senior lecturer in education and early childhood at Middlesex University London. She's a pedagogical organisational community leader in the early years sector, and together with Juno Sullivan, she's developed a model of what they call social leadership in early childhood education, which puts the social purpose of early childhood at the heart of what it means to lead others. So we are in good hands today. Mona will explore what we know about effective professional development when it really makes a difference to children's learning and well-being. She's going to share some examples of how other settings have developed effective approaches to professional development, and working within tight budgets as well, because obviously not all of us have fantastic training budgets. And really what this means for you and how you might creatively lead professional development among a team, whether it's small or large or working with pressing financial constraints. So without further ado, over to you, Mona.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Gail. Okay, just get my slides up. Fabulous. Okay, so as Gail said, yeah, I'm really excited to be here today talking about leading effective professional development across your team. Now, let me set the tone right from the get-go. This is not a kind of how-to. I cannot tell you the perfect way to lead effective professional development across your team. This is an exploration and it's a dialogue. It's trying to kind of learn together and collaboratively reflect on ways in which we can lead effective professional development across your team. So as well as the questions coming in, I really hope there's a chance for you to share practice among yourselves about what's working for you, what's not working for you, the issues that you're encountering, the strategies that you're finding. So this is as much a dialogue as it is a kind of presentation. The presentation, please take it as a kind of provocation for your own reflections. So what I want to do in today's talk is very short. I'll keep this short and sweet so that we have lots of time for that really rich dialogue, which is where the real learning can take place. I want to set the context, which you know better than I know because you're there and you're living it. I want to talk about where we can learn ideas from, you know, where are the places we can go for inspiration and advice and guidance in relation to professional development. And from that, I'm going to extract 4 key ideas that I want to share with you today. So those 4 key ideas, and I'll take you through these one by one, are the importance of job-embedded professional development, the possibilities of growing a coaching culture within your organizations, investing in others' leadership, and then extending the language of professional development. So don't worry if those mean not very much to you at the moment. I'm going to talk you through them and give lots of examples to make them come to life. And then, as I said, this really is about a chance to reflect, a chance to pause and think about what you're doing and what's working and what's not working. And I really hope that we'll have lots of time for that today. So let me jump straight in with the context. We know from research, you know, systematic research shows us that effective professional development really matters. It matters for staff, it affects recruitment, it affects retention, it affects well-being among staff. And all of those things play out in terms of children's outcomes. So you can trace the impact of effective professional development among early years staff in terms of children's outcomes, okay? But the research also shows us that not all professional development, or what's labeled as professional development, can deliver in that way. Yeah, it's not enough for hours to be set aside for professional development. They have to be used effectively. And in particular, there has to be strategy underpinning professional development. So it needs to be strategically planned, strategically delivered. And in particular, I want to draw attention to a review here, a systematic review of all the global evidence around professional development in early years conducted by Sue Rogers and colleagues, which shows us that only some professional development really works. And honestly, it works when there's good leadership underpinning it. Okay, so there's some strategizing going on about what is this professional development going to deliver and how are we going to make sure that it delivers it. Now, that's all well and good, but as you know, this context that we're in at the moment in the early years is really tough. It's really tough in many ways. It's tough for the skills shortage that Adele was mentioning. It's tough for the recruitment and retention challenges that we're all facing. And it's tough because where's the money? Where is the money to do excellent professional development? Yeah, we know that budgets are stretched. All the annual workforce surveys show us time and time again that many settings, a good proportion of settings, up to 50%, are only setting aside professional development budgets to cover compulsory training needs, so safeguarding and first aid. But there is no money set aside for leadership development or pedagogical development across the staff team. So, you know, let's make no bones about it. This is a really tough context. And within that tough context, a huge part of leading effective professional development is bringing creativity to the mix, thinking creatively about how we can still engage optimistically within that tough context. So where do we take learning from? So absolutely, we can look at the research on effective professional development in early years, and I'll carry on kind of referencing bits of research that have been done that seem to show kind of what's working, what really works for staff and what really works for children. But also I want to get a bit more personal in this presentation and draw on some of the leadership interviews I've been doing with June O'Sullivan for our book, Social Leadership in Early Childhood Education and Care. So we had the wonderful opportunity to interview leaders around the world, leaders in early years who are doing extraordinary things in small organizations, in big organizations of lots of different types. And we were trying to tap, as part of these interviews, into how do you do effective professional development within the tough contexts that you're facing. Okay, so a lot of the learning that I'm sharing today comes directly from what people across the sector globally are doing, how they're creatively addressing this challenge. Okay, and again, like I said before, that might not be systematic research, but it sparks off thoughts for ourselves. It sparks off reflections about what we might change or do differently, or what might be working really well for us at the moment. Okay, so based on that learning that I'm kind of trying to extract and offer up, there are 4 ideas that I'd like us to consider. So the first is the need to make time and space for job-embedded professional development. The second is this need, and they're all linked, to be honest, for growing a culture, coaching culture, okay? And as part of or flowing from that coaching culture is the investment in others' leadership. And kind of circling it all is this need to extend the language of professional development. Okay, so let's jump straight into those ideas. So, job-embedded professional development. It has a fancy name, but many of you will be doing it already. So this is basically an approach to professional development where we are flipping the narrative in terms of how we have traditionally maybe thought about professional development as something kind of separate, ring-fenced, you know, a special day out. Professional development as a one-day training off-site, professional development as a Zoom that's kind of separated from your working day, your everyday working day. What the research shows us is those days out might be useful as stimulation, but they only actually work to improve children's outcomes when the takeaways from that professional development are embedded. And in fact, in the kind of framework of job-embedded professional development, the professional development happens within practice. It's not a separate thing from practice, it's part of your practice day to day. And what we see is this correlation: the more embedded, the more effective. Okay, now this isn't just to say that you do your day job and you get better at it. You know, you don't. Unless you're investing in getting better at your job, you don't actually get better at your job. Or that's what the research designs. You have to have a framework surrounding that job embedded professional development. It has to be carefully designed and thought through, you know, and here I kind of raise some questions, you know, the who is going to do this job embedded professional development? Who's going to be in a supporting role? When's it going to happen? What's it going to involve? Why? What's the underlying purpose of it? Where does it happen and how does it happen? Okay, all of those things have to be designed and planned, and this is where the strategic leadership comes in. But if you can crack that, then actually you have a situation where, rather than paying for expensive courses that happen away from the setting, that require not just the cost of the course, but also the cover for the staff, what you can do is instead flip it so that the professional development is happening on site, day to day, okay, in a carefully structured way. So let me give you some examples of how that actually might look. And I'm going to go to one of my favorite interviews for the book, was with the CEO of Stepping Stones, which is a big nursery group in Tasmania in Australia. Now, that context may feel different to many of you, but in fact, they're facing lots of the same challenges that we are in the UK: recruitment challenges, retention challenges, limited professional development budgets. But one of the things that Chantal, as the CEO of this nursery group, had invested in was a kind of pedagogical leader role, working across multiple settings, essentially whose role it was to come in and instigate and provoke these gentle conversations on the floor with staff. Okay, so this is while staff were engaging in their role. It wasn't a kind of separate thing, but it was these conversations to get them reflecting on what they were doing, on how they were developing, on the strengths, on the weaknesses of their practice. Okay, so a quote from Chantal explains that better than I can. The pedagogical leader doesn't take anyone away and say, let's make a plan. She uses quiet, gentle conversations, gentle pushes, gentle suggestions, and then helps with scaffolding where they, the professional, want to be. Okay, so these can be conversations that are very much in the moment. Oh, I'm really interested in how you set this area up. Can you tell me more about it? How does that connect with the pedagogy of the setting? Okay, that's interesting. So this decision, so those gentle exchanges about what you're doing day to day, but it can also be longer term. So Chantal goes on to explain, give the example of a professional within the setting, Jonathan, who was lacking in confidence. And this pedagogical leader works with Jonathan through these gentle conversations on the floor over weeks and weeks and weeks in order to build up his understanding of what he is offering to the setting. Okay, and starts to grow the kind of portfolio of contributions that he's making to the setting, and in turn his confidence grows and grows. So we have these gentle conversations on the floor. Okay, now these gentle conversations only work when there's time and space for them. So they don't work if somebody's kind of in a rush and asking in a very flustered way, kind of, why did you decide to do something like this? So they have to strike the right tone, and that's only possible with the time and the space. Okay, so of course that's going to involve some quite strategic planning, but it also requires a particular approach, a mindset within the setting. And here we can think about that mindset as a coaching culture. Okay, so when you strip it back, that job embedded professional development is only going to work if there's the right organizational culture, where there is a kind of willingness and the ability of staff to coach one another. Okay, now you could obviously fork out loads of money on coaching courses. And I think coaching is a fantastic thing to learn about. So I don't want to discourage anybody from doing that. But ultimately, I also want to say that you don't have to spend money on learning how to be an amazing coach, because the basics of coaching, the research shows us, are really quite simple, in that essentially the coaching model is always about inviting others to take ownership over problem solving. Okay, let me make this a bit more real. In the Learning Enrichment Foundation, which again is a big nursery group in Toronto, in Canada, one of the things that the leadership were finding among the staff in the settings is a kind of permission-seeking culture. So staff would come to their supervisor or to the director of the centre for every little thing and say, what should I do? A parent said this, what should I do? A child's done this, what should I do? We don't have any money to spend on this, what should I do? Okay, and everything was directed upwards. To flip that, they didn't have a lot of money to spend, but what they tried to do is to create an organizational culture of pushing back, so that when somebody comes with that question of what should I do, they make themselves pause, even though they might have an answer on the tip of their tongue, and they flip it and say, what do you think we should do? And try to kind of instigate that ownership over the problem solving. Okay, it doesn't always work, but what it does do is create a kind of general sense within the organization that actually this is something we all own. These problems are something that we all own and that we all need to solve. Okay, and this becomes the basis of those gentle conversations on the floor. So rather than seeing those conversations as this is what you need to do now, it's what do you think we need to do now? How do you think we can develop things? So let me give a kind of example close to home, perhaps. So Nadine is a baby room leader that I recently interviewed. She works in a Scottish seaside nursery, single site nursery. And she knew that as a setting and as a baby room, she felt really that the outdoor space wasn't being made use of fully, that the babies should be out there more often than they were. Okay, now she could have come to her team and said, we need to use the outdoor space more often. How are we going to do that? I've got a rota. Let's get out there. Let's be using that space more often. But really quite instinctively, which I think is amazing, Nadine knew that that wasn't going to work for the staff in the baby room, that actually what was going to work much better was to facilitate kind of ownership over that situation, that problem, and therefore more ownership over the solutions for it. So in a team meeting, she started an open dialogue. What do you think about how we're using our outdoor space at the moment? Okay, so potentially the staff in that moment could have come back and said, it's fine. It's fine how we're using the outdoor space. But predictably, they didn't. They came back with lots of kind of moments of joy in the outdoor space, but also barriers to getting outdoors, and times when they wanted to be outdoors more, but it wasn't possible. And so what they could do through these dialogues in the short team meetings was start to unpick this problem together and work out a solution. Okay, now that's great for using the outdoor space, but it's great on a much bigger scale, because what Nadine is actually doing is instilling an organizational culture in which everybody owns the problems and everybody owns the solutions. Okay, I'm not going to lie, there'll be some pushback. Some staff will not want to own the problems or own the solutions. It's not as easy as just kind of asking an open question, but many will jump into owning the problems and owning the solutions, because actually it's makes work more enjoyable when we do. Yeah, when we have those dialogues and when we solve the problems together. Okay, so growing a coaching culture can be as simple as having that question in your back pocket and being prepared to use it as often as you can What do you think we should do? What do you think we need to do? Now, this relates to one of the elements in the social leadership model. So you'll see 5 elements here. I'm not going to talk about all of these today, but the one I wanted to pick up on relating to professional development is investing in others' leadership. Because what you can see is that that question, what do you think we should do, is actually the starting point on a journey for somebody else to become a leader. Okay, so that invitation to own the problem, to collaboratively own the problem and own a solution, that is the beginning of leadership. And I have a lovely quote here from an amazing woman, now a politician in Iceland, but she was the director of a play school in Reykjavik. Her name's Nicole Lee Mosti. I'd really recommend looking her up. She just got the most amazing biography you've ever come across. But she says something really powerful, I think, in her interview about the need to constantly be looking for chances to invest in others' leadership. So she says, if you're going to build a house where everyone develops and learns, you can't have leaders that like to hoard responsibilities and skills. Hoarders repel people from the vision, from wanting to take a part and having their own initiative. You have to build the house with lots of space for collaboration, reflection, and community leadership. I could fill slides and slides with things that Nicole goes on to say, which are really inspiring about how you do this and kind of what you bring to those conversations in which you're inviting others to share the responsibilities and the skills with you. But I think this is really powerful way of thinking about it. We can't hoard. So part of effective professional development is an invitation. Yeah, so it's not about the courses, it's not about kind of the days out, it's simply an invitation to others to join you in the leadership of the setting, or the leadership of the room, or the leadership of a particular initiative, or the leadership of one particular part of a particular room. Okay, so Nicole in her play school, she changed the structure. They used to have a kind of rota where staff would move between different areas over the course of the day. And what she realized is she really wanted people that work in the setting to bring their passion to work, to use that passion as the basis for leadership. And so what she asked people to do is instead to associate themselves with an area of the setting. So it might be the clay table, it might be the gardening part of the nursery, it might be the kind of reading or writing corner. It might be wherever they kind of feel that they want to bring things, that they want to contribute. And that step towards ownership becomes this step towards leadership. And if people are on that self-motivated journey towards leadership, they're professionally developing. Yeah, there isn't a way to not develop if you are embodying leadership. So there are kind of ways to structure this. So Nicole's way of doing it, that's one way to kind of structure that, to get people thinking about themselves as a leader, even if they're not using that word. But there are lots of other ways to do it. So to give some examples, Jacqueline Lamb at the Indigo Childcare Group, when she joined as CEO about 5 years ago, I think, she used something called the ideas process, which essentially was that staff could bring an idea for something that they wanted to do. And there was like a little form, not intimidating, where they could say, I think we should be doing this with the children. And they could back it up with a tiny bit of research. That might be a program that they saw which showcased the initiative. It might be an article that they read in Nursery World or Parenta about something that they could be doing. And so through this ideas process at Indigo, They had wonderful things coming out. They started preschool Spanish with the children because they had a Spanish-speaking member of staff who was passionate about working with the children to learn Spanish. And in fact, that ended up influencing the policy, the local policy, because everybody else was so impressed with the Spanish-speaking 3-year-olds at Indigo. They had yoga introduced into the setting. They had animal therapy coming into the setting. And these were all ideas brought by staff, apprentices often. But there was this kind of sense in which your ideas are welcomed, your ownership over making this a better organization is what we're really about. Now, you can do that through the ideas process like Jacqueline at Leith. Juno Sullivan is a big believer in action research, which is essentially the ideas process, but just with some kind of extra stages of reflection written in. And they have all kinds of action research initiatives happening at Leith, small ones and big ones. And they come from lots of different places. So they come from a practitioner asking the question, how has COVID affected children's mental health? Okay, I feel like we need to investigate this as a nursery group. How are we going to do that? What are we going to do with the findings? How is this going to influence us? But it might also just be, oh, I went to a workshop on woodwork, and I think that this could be really great for some of the children in the setting. Is this something we could try? What would we need to do in order to set up a really basic woodwork station? Now, the ideas process, action research, they are systems that they have in place. But I come back to the Learning Enrichment Foundation because ultimately it's still this question, isn't it? What do you think we should do? Okay. And I mean, I think if there's one takeaway from today, I'd really hope it's that question, that ultimately whenever we are asking that question, we're setting the stage for somebody else's professional development. And that requires a bit of time to ask that question. It definitely requires patience. It requires the motivation to invest in others' leadership, but it doesn't require any money. Asking that question, what do you think we should do? The last thing I want to raise, and this kind of just sits around all of those other ideas, is just the need to then flag and signal to staff that what they're engaging in is professional development. Because you might have been listening to some of those ideas, like that question, what do you think we should do? And feeling, well, is that really professional development? Does it count? And I'm definitely arguing it does, and that the research backs us up on that it really is the starting point for good professional development. But that needs to be sold and signaled to staff, because a huge part, and you'll know this from your own experience, a huge part of motivation and fulfillment at work is the knowledge and belief that you are progressing, that you are getting better, that you are professionally developing. And so it really helps when those around you flag that, And so here, this extending the language of professional development is really about saying, okay, what we've just done, this gentle conversation that we've just had, that's professional development. Me asking you the question, what do you think we should do, is professional development. So that staff understand that you're investing in their professional development and that you believe in that and you commit to it. And so this might come about in kind of the just day-to-day language that you use. So could you take the lead on this? I think it would be amazing for your professional development. It would be great to see you developing in this way as a professional. I'm really looking forward to our conversation later, because I think we need to have a chance to come together and talk about your professional development. And even things like the names that we give to things, appraisals or supervisions, thinking about ways to kind of rename those conversations to flag that they are professional development. So I've given the example here of appraisal instead being called a professional development conversation, but at Leaf they go one step further, and that's a talent enrichment conversation. So they don't talk about appraisals, they only talk about talent enrichment. And through that language, you're signaling, this is how we think. This is our organizational culture. We believe in you, we invest in you, and we want to see you develop and grow. And that, again, it doesn't cost any money to make those changes in language. Okay, so I want to leave lots of time for collaborative reflection and dialogue. And I'll just try and set us up for that a little bit with some kind of suggested reflections and next steps. So I definitely think it's worth kind of thinking about the job embedded professional development that you do at the moment in your setting. And you might feel we do loads of it actually, and it might just be not named that, and that's great. Or you might be thinking, well, there are opportunities for us to do a bit more, in which case those questions of who, when, where, what, how, why are a really useful way to kind of scaffold that reflection about how it might come in more. You can also do a bit of a self-assessment around the extent to which your organizational culture has this shared ownership over problem solving. How much are staff in the setting willing to take ownership over the problems, or ownership over getting better, or ownership over the solutions to things? And it's worth being really kind of honest in that reflection. And if there's zero, that's just not a thing, or that's a thing for 2 or 3 individuals, but the majority of staff, it's not really, doesn't feel right, then that reflection and that honesty is a great starting point for thinking about how to begin to flip that culture. You could, as part of flipping that culture, think about more structured processes that you can put in place to invest in the leadership of others. An ideas process, really simple to bring about, a small form that staff have access to within their professional development conversations, where they can begin to put forward ideas and see those realized across the setting. And also just worth thinking about, the words, the language that you're using in your setting at the moment. How often is professional development talked about, or team learning talked about? It doesn't have to be the phrase professional development, but it needs to signal that you believe in and want to see the progress of others. And are there opportunities to introduce that language a bit more without it feeling too forced? Okay, so I hope those questions kind of open up some new avenues of thinking and doing within whichever context you're based at the moment. And I really just offer them up as something that might get the juices flowing in order for you to creatively address this challenge of effective professional development in what is an extremely difficult context at the moment. So thank you so much, and looking forward to answering questions as best I can, but also just hearing your thoughts and ideas.
Thank you so much, Mona. That was amazing. Whenever you guys as experts talk about different topics, I'm a leader in my own business as well, and just to understand how you can change the vernacular of actually how you phrase something, actually that makes people even think about a simple task that they've accomplished, actually how that's improved their own professional development. It's not something I've even considered. I do brainstorming with my team a lot, and even that, and how they will share ideas, actually how you can change that to say, actually that's a great idea, almost make them the owner of that task that they've kind of come up with, and giving them that kind of journey. I love that idea. I wrote something as well. I love your ideas process, which is something definitely I will take away from today to try and embed in the culture within our company. So yeah, thank you so much for that. We've had a few questions in. I will start. I'm sure Gail's got some as well. So one of the questions we had was actually, how important do you think is a mentor within a workplace?
Yeah, great question. I want to say essential, but I also want to leave room for there to be hope when a mentor isn't as effective as you might hope. So we know that mentoring and coaching are kind of essential components of people making progress in the workplace. And so that kind of mentor-mentee relationship is the first go-to, especially for people that are new into the sector or are new into an organization. So mentors are kind of an essential linchpin within this professional development. They're often the ones that can, if they're invested in as mentors, they can begin to do those gentle conversations on the floor that we were talking about. Sometimes what can happen is, we have that trickle down effect, don't we? So by investing in kind of the mentor's capacity to mentor, actually that can be the most effective way to invest in professional development across the setting, because it's those conversations, knowing how to do those conversations and having the time and the space to do them well, that then enables everybody else's professional development. So yeah, I think mentors are kind of a huge lever within that organization in relation to some of those key conversations.
Great, thank you. We had, how can we encourage the more junior members to look ahead? I think you've kind of covered that a little bit, and wanting to secure their own development. So I think you've mentioned about, as long as they're contributing ideas, someone's like taking the ownership and there's more collaboration. Is there anything else that you can think of that we can encourage our junior members of staff, even some of our apprentices, to try and get them to be, some of them are quite shy and they're happy to talk,
Yes.
to talk openly, or, afraid to fail or something, or even being judged, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think confidence is just a huge issue in our sector generally. I really do. I think it's a huge thing. And so I think one of the first steps is kind of being really clear with yourself that a lack of confidence is not the same as a lack of desire to progress. Because I think sometimes, particularly with young junior members of staff, what is actually a lack of confidence comes across as an unwillingness and is read by others as a kind of, you don't really want to be here and you don't really want to progress. What I would suggest is that 99.9% of the time, people are happier when they know they're making progress and getting better at things, but that there can be a kind of emotional block to that when we lack confidence. So we can exactly that fear of failure. And so rather than kind of going, okay, you don't look like you really want to be here or that you really want to make progress, so I'm just going to kind of leave you and hope that you do a good enough job. This is actually a chance to really double down with that member of the team and look for opportunities to bring them on. So for example, I come back to LEAF again because they have a nice model around apprentices where they have an apprentice manager. Now that might not be something available to a single site setting. I completely get that. But essentially this role is somebody that works with the apprentices ultimately to build their confidence. And so they're looking out for, wow, you did that well. You did that interaction well. I think you like being on this table with the children. Am I right? Trying to like find the little ways in and starting always with the good. That is a great idea, actually. And what the apprentice manager will often do is then scaffold or set up the conversations that the apprentice might be reluctant to have. So they might have a great idea that they mention, but they don't want to take it through the ideas process. They don't want to bring it to their line manager. It's the apprentice manager's job to look out for those sparks and then find a way to make them happen. Because as soon as that apprentice has then seen that, wow, what I suggest has an impact, or what I do has an impact, and people believe in it, then that's going to just flow from there, hopefully. So you might not have an apprentice manager, but thinking about who can play that role for the apprentices and really help to kind of grow their confidence. I think that's going to be essential.
Brilliant, thank you.
You're welcome.
We've got a couple here, Mona. one of them is a subject that's close to most people's hearts. It's time, you know, and time is not in abundance. But as managers, and we have to step in sometimes to make up the numbers, you know, how can we find that time? What can you recommend for us to put in place to train and develop our staff? Because we are so time poor. I know you touched on some of that earlier, but I think some people will just say, I haven't got the time to do all of this. And it's just changing that culture, isn't it?
Well, I mean, no, to be fair, Gail, it's more than check. You know, I think first of all, we have to recognize there is not enough time. You know, I think it's really important to be upfront about this. We can't just say it's changing the culture or being a better leader, because we're all so stretched in the sector at the moment. And I think it's really important to recognize that and bring that kind of compassion to others by bringing that compassion to ourselves. So, you know, I honestly, I don't want to kind of go, oh, there isn't enough time, but if you do this, there is enough time. I think that sense of time poverty is a real thing and has to be kind of recognized. I think we can bring to ourselves that question of, so what do you think we should do? and start to kind of find the little chinks in the armor, the openings that we can use. And so, for example, one of the things that some really effective leaders at different levels I've seen working within early years use are taking conversations that they have to have as part of the week, you know. So the team meeting at the beginning, you know, for a room within a setting, you know, so let's say it's the baby room practitioners coming together on a Monday morning to be like, here are our kind of plans for the week. Here's our schedule for the week. Here's what we need to do. Here's what we need to remember. Now that might be only 10 minutes. But what the research shows and what kind of learning from different leaders suggests is even using 2 minutes of that meeting for that shared ownership over problem solving is beneficial. Or even just using 2 to 3 minutes for kind of building the connections between the team and the sense of confidence among the team is beneficial. So I think, you know, recognizing that absolutely time is scarce, but also just seeing the kind of the 2 minutes here, the 3 minutes here, where instead of saying, could you go and do that, please, because that needs to be done, it's asking the question instead. If we're looking around here, you happy with this as it is at the moment? What do you think needs to change? You happy with the setup? You know, so I think it's often being as leaders compassionate to ourselves, giving ourselves the space and the time to ask the questions rather than just to direct. But that is hard when everybody's so stretched.
Thank you. Amber Reeve has given us an example of what they're doing in their setting. And she says, we carry out most of professional development that staff are wanting to do, as well as compulsory. She's currently studying her level 5 leadership and management, but the challenges are finding the time, of course, and the funding. Yeah. So she was just giving us an example of what they're doing in their setting. And I know you mentioned this earlier as well, but using those times in the meetings, and we have another question about brainstorming and using that time. Do you think the brainstorming with our staff is a good idea to get them to share ideas, which I know you're going to say yes. But by doing that, it's giving them that ownership as well, isn't it? So it's flipping that conversation to ask them what they would do or how they would do it.
Yeah, but what's really important is not just the brainstorming, but then the follow through. You know, that brainstorm has got to end, even if it's 2-minute long brainstorm, in an action step that somebody goes on to take. Because what's really demoralizing, has the opposite effect that we want, is let me hear your ideas. Oh, I've heard your ideas, and then nothing happens. You know, it can really shatter confidence among junior members of staff in particular. So really important to kind of have quite a structured brainstorm where you do end up with that. Those are amazing ideas. Which one should we take forward, and how are we going to take it forward, and who has ownership over this? You know, so just being really clear around the next steps and how that's going to follow through.
Thank you. I think, Adele, I think you're on mute.
That's always useful.
Yeah.
You want to ask the last question, Gail?
Yeah, it was one going back, Mona, to what do you think we should do? And this is a big takeaway that I've had from today, as well as the ideas cards, which I'm designing in my head already. Do you think members of the staff, whether they're junior or senior, I don't think it matters, are scared of failure if they speak up? So throwing it back and flipping it, in theory, sounds amazing, but will you come across some issues, do you think, with staff thinking, I don't want to say, I don't want to be scared of failure, or I don't want to be wrong? Some people are more naturally coachy type of people, aren't they? More natural coaches and leaders than others, and they might just have that barrier and that confidence, probably going back to the confidence thing.
Definitely. And so there will be some resistance. So asking that question, what do you think we should do, is not always going to end with somebody then going, oh, well, actually, now I've thought about it, I've got a perfect solution. A lot of the time they might be coming back and saying, I really don't know, or I really need you to help me with this, or it's your job to tell me. There may well be some resistance. That resistance is typically coming from a lack of confidence in what they have to offer. But asking that question is still the starting point, because what you can then do is go, okay, maybe that question's too big. Let's break it down together. What are some of the options here? What do you think, if you were to ask so-and-so, what ideas would they have, do you think? And it's very much about using the we as well, because that reduces the intimidation. So although it's the what do you think we should do, it's still our problem. I'm not saying it's your problem to solve. I'm not, it's not me pushing you away and saying go and solve the problem, but it's the what do you think we should do? And I think that we is still really important to hold on to.
Mona, we had a question from Hannah that's just come in, and actually it's I love this question. I'll be really interested to see what you're going to say on this one. I can quite see this is going to be a challenge on this. For me, I would just struggle to even think how to answer, but I'm sure you'll come up with a good answer. She's asked to say, how do you support a senior member of staff as a young leader in a room?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand that question. How do you support
a senior member of staff as a young leader of a room? So, potentially they're a lot more older, but they as quite a junior member, in a team.
Okay, so they're older in age, but junior in terms of the staff body.
Yeah.
Why would that? I mean, I'm going to push back and just say, why would that be?
Well, maybe Hannah can take herself off mute and ask if Hannah is still on with us. I'm sure she is.
So as a room leader, I have a senior member of staff who's much older and has her own childminder when she was doing childminding, and sometimes she doesn't like the way the childcare education is leading forward and find it hard to change her ways, and just trying to support that as I'm younger and started out with the new set of early years. It's just finding the way to do that with her as a professional development.
Yeah, oh, now I understand completely, Hannah. Thanks for giving that context. Yeah, that is a really, it's a difficult situation to be in, isn't it? Because you're managing, and you might feel, okay, I can be really sympathetic to this person and kind of say, wow, let's learn from you. You have so much experience, you've got so much to bring, and that's great for kind of building the relationship. But then also as a leader, you need to be able to draw the line and say, well, this is actually what we're going to do. And this is the way forward. And we need to be aware of this. And so I think really it's about striking that balance. So the kind of the resistance that you're probably meeting is likely to be increased the less valued that staff member feels. So it is really important to say, what can we learn from you? recognizing that you have experience here, you have expertise in this, we want to learn from you. Those kind of statements of belief and commitment to her experience don't actually jeopardize your leadership. They really strengthen the relationship that you have with that person, and they're likely to reduce the sense of resistance. There may still be at the times where you need to kind of be moving something forward. And again, I think investing in that member of staff's leadership could be a good way to do that. So let's say there's something new that needs to come in, and potentially that staff member saying, oh, why do we need to do that? That's, it's completely unnecessary. We do not need to be doing this. It's a waste of time, something like that, right? Now, what potentially you can be doing is anticipating that reaction, and actually maybe even before the communal meeting is setting her up with the, could you lead on this? This is a new way forward. This is something we're being asked to look into. Because you're so experienced, would love to do this together with you, love to make this change with you. Obviously, Hannah, if there's kind of resistance to a point where it is getting dramatically in the way of improving kind of outcomes in the room, then that needs to be addressed with the manager and kind of management procedures and processes followed. But as a starting point, I would say don't be scared to kind of really big her up in front of other staff and say, you're amazing, you're so experienced, please can we learn from this? And then if there are chances to actually get her behind the scenes, introducing some of the new stuff, finding out about some of the new stuff and being the one to bring that new stuff, it's going to change the narrative in the team. So that rather than just having the person who's like resisting change, maybe they start to be the person that's bringing a bit of the change, and things might start to loosen up.
Thank you. Wow, that has just turned it around for me. I love how you just really kind of just turned that whole situation around. I know I always say this, and Gail will say my favorite saying is every day is a school day, but I've really enjoyed this. Is there any other questions anybody has got for Mona? You can take yourself off mute if you want to just ask any questions or share any ideas if anybody is using different techniques in their settings. Nope. Okay, great. Mona, thank you so much. This has been amazing. We have really enjoyed it, and we will obviously share this presentation and the recording with everybody later on today. So thank you so much for everybody's time. We really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye. Bye.